Either this cycle is different, or we've already seen the Bitcoin top at $123,000 and are now heading into a bear market because every cycle has played out almost identically. We had the halving here, marked in blue, then 518 days later, we hit our bull run top exactly at that point. Here in 2021, we had the halving, and 550 days later, we reached our bull run top. So, in terms of timing and data, it's relatively similar. And right now, we're already more than 500 days past the halving. And that's the thing, so it's pretty exciting at the moment because either this cycle is going to stretch out a bit longer or we've really already seen the Bitcoin top here. Those are the two scenarios I see here. And you really have to say, yes, it's interesting to see whether things will actually play out the way we imagine. And you also have to mention, just looking at Bitcoin dominance, things are getting tighter and tighter. We also don't have unlimited time to correct here. In the past, that's actually how it was at times. We had a 12-month drop in Bitcoin dominance, and that was really the period when the altcoins performed beautifully. In 2021, it was already much tighter, and the Bitcoin season lasted a bit longer. And currently, we see that the Bitcoin season in this cycle was extremely long, so this altcoin season will probably be a bit more compact, a bit faster, but more intense, or we might not experience an altcoin season at all. But I don't want to scare you or anything like that. Let's just take a relaxed look at the whole thing, because starting from September 17th, we are pretty much certain to see interest rate cuts. With a 90% probability, we will see a 25 basis point rate cut, and with a 10% probability, we might even see a 50 basis point cut. That means a rate cut is coming either way. Now, the only question is whether it will be 25 or 50 basis points. And I believe the next market reaction will depend on that as well. Because if we see a 50 basis point cut, the market will surge sharply. If it's 25 basis points, that's already priced in, so we might see a slight correction before rising again. Or if there's no rate cut at all, the correction will be even stronger. However, no rate cut at all is highly unlikely at this point in time. And generally speaking, you can say that rate cuts are good for the market, but they're already priced in at the moment. Accordingly, this could turn into a sell the news event. But I would say, let's wait and see, because we still have a few days until then. This cycle is really a bit different because in the past, we were in an upswing. In this cycle, we're climbing step by step, like going up a staircase. And that's probably also because we simply have new players, bigger players, and people have evolved. That means the cycle is definitely a bit different this time. At the moment, however, we can also see that especially in the last few days, inflows into Bitcoin and Ethereum have dropped significantly and that we're now seeing larger outflows instead. And that's also a sign that suggests we're likely to see some selling off for now. It was exactly the same in 2021 because back then we only entered the bear market once institutional interest in the Grayscale Trust started to wane. Right now, that interest is slowly fading. That's definitely something we need to keep an eye on in the coming period. And as I already mentioned at the beginning, based on time and data, the bull run top could already be in. In terms of timing, we're already in the window where you could say, yeah, this could be the bull run top. Some are still speculating because between about the 10th and 16th of August, we saw quite a bit of retail money coming in and there was definitely global interest in the crypto market during that time. I mean, you can see it here, the score definitely spiked and we had almost as much Google search interest in crypto as in 2021, which is pretty crazy. At this point though, I would speculate that we could see significantly more in this cycle than we did in 2021. But this definitely suggests that we're now likely to see a bigger sell-off, which we're already pricing in at the moment. And it's really an extremely tough question whether we've already seen the cycle high. You can always go by time and data, by on-chain data. We can look at the P-cycle top indicator. We can look at a lot of things. But I think this chart is actually pretty good too. In blue, we see the stablecoins. The market capitalization keeps building up there, and in white, we see Bitcoin here. And one thing is clear, the higher Bitcoin rises, the more stablecoins are sold off. Because people cash out of Bitcoin, take the stablecoins, and then cash out the stablecoins. That's basically the rhythm. But right now we can see that for the first time stablecoins are even surpassing Bitcoin here. Bitcoin is at such a high level, but stablecoins are still seeing extreme demand, and that makes me really optimistic. In the 2021 cycle, we could clearly see that when the stablecoin market cap dropped by several $billion and corrected for the first time, that was exactly the moment when we saw the cycle top. It was obvious that people were selling their Bitcoin, selling in the crypto market, cashing out into stablecoins, and then cashing out the stablecoins. That means whenever you see sell-offs in the stablecoin market cap, it indicates a local top or maybe even the cycle top. And right now, we're climbing up here like crazy. And that's extremely positive. And regarding the retail topic again, while we do have some retail presence in the market, we can see that relatively speaking, retail has given up. Every time Bitcoin has gone up here, we've seen in red or green that retail investors have also jumped back in. So we're climbing up here. We can clearly see this curve from retail. Retail is jumping straight into the market. But now we've experienced a bigger upward trend in Bitcoin again, yet we see that, relatively speaking, retail hasn't jumped in as much during the last uptrend. And to me, that means retail investors have slowly started to give up. And that actually makes me optimistic in the long term, because retail is always wrong. And if they're already starting to give up now, that tells me we're getting closer to the point where things will turn around and we can start rising nicely again. And especially with these interest rate cuts, there are a few things that need to be considered. Just because we see rate cuts doesn't mean we'll immediately see prices go up. Because what many people completely forget is that we've already had interest rate cuts in 2024. Most people don't even have that on their radar anymore. We had rate cuts, interest rates went down, but we also experienced a nice upward trend as a result. That means interest rate cuts, upward trend. That's often how it looks, but not always. I mean, we also had rate cuts here, and things didn't go well at all. But we also had the corona crash in between here. When did things really start to go well? When we got further rate cuts here, when we moved toward a zero interest rate policy, but also when the economy recovered from corona. That was the key. Plus the combination with additional fresh liquidity, meaning substantial liquidity in the market. That's what made the bull run in 2021. So simple rate cuts don't mean we'll go up right away. You should be aware of that. They can be a trigger for it, but rate cuts are only important in combination with a healthy economy. I mean, in 2017 we also had a big one, even though we were continuously getting higher interest rates, which is actually counterproductive. But as I said, falling interest rates in a healthy economy that looks good and sustainable is extremely bullish. But right now I think we still have a few economic problems that need to be resolved. That's why September 19th is actually even more important than September 17th, because on the 17th we'll see the interest rate decision. On the 19th, we'll see a lot of company earnings again, and it's extremely important to check those. How is the US economy really doing? Because if the US economy looks good, then we can see a big rise. But if we continue to have difficulties and interest rates are only being lowered because otherwise we would collapse, then that's not really good, and that's something to keep in mind here. In the end, the longer this whole thing drags on, the more sustainably we can rise step by step. But at some point, we need that phase of euphoria so that something happens with the altcoins as well. But I mean, this upward trend was solid. We were ranked 13th among all apps here. Even among finance apps, we were number 1 with Coinbase. That means there was already real demand for crypto here. That was simply at the end of 2024. But when we experienced this bigger upward trend in the summer, in the past few weeks, we didn't really move up in the Coinbase app rankings. I mean, ranking 150, that's really not impressive. 12th place among finance apps. So, considering that we're much higher here, that's extremely positive, because here we got a bit of retail involved. This here was mostly driven by institutions, and that makes me extremely optimistic, because if they join in as well, we're still far from reaching the peak. And I think this picture says more than 1,000 words. Take a look at how many bitcoins were mined this year compared to how many bitcoins were bought up just by institutional investors. In comparison, you can clearly see that there's just so much demand for Bitcoin. We simply can't get enough new Bitcoins onto the market. That means in turn, the Bitcoins have to be bought back from the exchanges, and that's ultimately the supply shock. That's just absolutely brilliant. This system is absolutely ingenious, and it simply shows us that even now, Bitcoin is still massively undervalued in the long term. But it's important to understand, I'm talking about the long term. Of course, Bitcoin is already expensive. It could certainly drop significantly lower again, but in the long term, Bitcoin and the entire crypto market are still massively undervalued when you look at it in perspective. In the coming years, we'll be getting fewer and fewer fresh Bitcoins on the market, and right now it doesn't look like demand is going down, which is extremely bullish. And friends, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, leave a like and a comment, and see you next time. Bye.